Let me ask you something. Have you ever been lying in bed, completely still, eyes closed, and your brain just starts playing a movie? Not a memory, not a dream, a scenario. Maybe it's an argument you haven't had yet, but you've already rehearsed every line. Maybe it's a conversation where you finally say the thing you should have said 3 years ago. Maybe it's an entire alternate life where you made a different choice, moved to a different city, became a slightly different version of yourself. And you're so into it that when reality interrupts, your alarm, a notification, someone calling your name, you feel genuinely annoyed, like you were pulled out of something important. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know two things. First, you are not alone. And second, what your brain is doing in those moments is far more sophisticated, far more meaningful, and honestly, far more beautiful than most people give it credit for. Because here's what most people assume, that imagining fake scenarios is a waste of time, a symptom of anxiety maybe, or avoidance, something a little embarrassing that you probably shouldn't mention. People joke about it. Oh, I argued with my boss in the shower and destroyed him. But underneath the joke, there's often this quiet belief that doing this makes you somehow less grounded, less functional, less okay than people who don't do it. And I want to take that belief apart today, carefully, because the psychology here is genuinely fascinating. So let's start with what's actually happening when your brain runs these simulations. Neuroscientists have a name for the network that activates when you're not focused on any external task, when you're daydreaming, imagining, or mentally rehearsing. They call it the default mode network. And for a long time, researchers thought this network was essentially the brain idling, like a car at a stoplight. Wasted energy, background noise. But then they looked closer, and what they found completely changed the picture. The default mode network is not idle at all. It is working. It's integrating memories, processing emotions, simulating future scenarios, constructing your sense of self, and building your understanding of other people's minds. In other words, when you zone out and start imagining that conversation with your mother that hasn't happened yet, your brain is doing some of the most complex cognitive work it ever does. Think about that for a second. The moments you've been told to snap out of, those are the moments your brain is doing graduate-level work.
Now, people who imagine fake scenarios tend to fall into a few recognizable patterns, and you might see yourself in more than one. There's the rehearser, the person who mentally prepares for conversations before they happen, running through how it might go, what the other person might say, what the best response would be. This is actually incredibly adaptive. Research on mental simulation shows that people who mentally rehearse difficult conversations are significantly better at navigating conflict, regulating their emotions in real time, and communicating what they actually mean. Your brain is essentially building a flight simulator. Pilots don't learn to fly in real emergencies. They practice in controlled conditions first. That's what you're doing at 2 a.m. when you're preparing for a conversation with your landlord. Then there's the rethinker, someone who replays past scenarios with different outcomes. You go back into a conversation that went badly, and you rewrite the ending. You say the smart thing, the kind thing, the brave thing. And yes, this can slide into rumination if you're not careful, but the base instinct is actually your brain doing something remarkable. It's trying to extract a lesson. It's running the scenario again because it hasn't finished processing it. Psychologists call this counterfactual thinking, and while it can be painful, it's also how humans learn, adapt, and develop moral intuitions. Every time you think, I should have said this instead, you are quietly updating your internal rulebook for how to be a better version of yourself. And then there's my personal favorite, the world builder. This is the person who doesn't just simulate real conversations. They construct entire fictional realities, a different job, a different relationship, a different life playing out in vivid detail. Sometimes these scenarios have no grounding in reality at all. They're pure imagination. And this is where people feel the most shame because it seems the most disconnected from real life. But here's what the research actually says. This kind of elaborate imaginative thinking is strongly associated with higher creativity, higher emotional intelligence, and a greater capacity for empathy. When you imagine being someone else, even a fictional someone else, you are exercising the same cognitive machinery that allows you to understand the people around you. You are practicing perspective taking at an Olympic level. Writers, therapists, diplomats, great parents, they all share this capacity. The ability to fully inhabit another point of view is not a distraction from real life. In many ways, it is one of the most important skills a human being can have. Now, I want to be honest with you, because this wouldn't be complete without it. There is a version of imaginary scenario building that does become a problem. When the simulations are always catastrophic, when your brain is running worst-case scenarios on a loop, and you're living inside anxiety's greatest hits album, that's your nervous system trying to protect you from threats that may not materialize. When the fantasy world becomes so appealing that the real world starts to feel unbearable by comparison, that's worth paying attention to. And when the replaying of past events becomes a way to punish yourself rather than learn from yourself, that's rumination, not reflection. There's a difference between your brain processing something and your brain torturing you with something, and it's worth learning to tell the gap apart.
But even here, the instinct underneath is not broken, it's just misdirected. Your brain is trying to keep you safe, or trying to give you something you need, or trying to make sense of a world that genuinely doesn't always make sense. The mechanism isn't the problem. Sometimes it just needs to be gently redirected. What I find most profound about all of this is what it says about human consciousness itself. We are the only species on Earth that can mentally time travel, that can leave the present moment and inhabit a past that no longer exists, or a future that hasn't happened yet. We are the only creatures who live simultaneously in reality and in story, and that dual existence is not a glitch, it is the feature. It is what allowed early humans to plan for winters they hadn't experienced yet, to cooperate across groups by imagining other people's intentions, to build cathedrals and symphonies and entire civilizations out of ideas that didn't exist until someone sat quietly and imagined them. When you lie in bed and let your mind wander into scenarios that will never happen, or might happen, or should have happened differently, you are doing something ancient and human and deeply meaningful. You are a storytelling animal doing what storytelling animals do. You are making sense of your world the only way consciousness knows how, through narrative, through simulation, through the quiet, invisible theater of your own mind. So the next time someone tells you to stop daydreaming, or the next time you catch yourself feeling guilty about the elaborate scenario you just spent 20 minutes inside, I want you to remember this. Your brain is not wasting time. It is rehearsing, processing, creating, and connecting. It is doing its job with extraordinary dedication. And maybe the most useful question isn't, why do I keep imagining things that aren't real? Maybe the better question is, what is my mind trying to work out? Because there's almost always an answer, and that answer is almost always worth listening to. If this made you think of your own mental habits, the scenarios you run, the conversations you rehearse, the alternate lives you visit when the real one gets quiet, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you're someone who's never really thought about this before, and now you're wondering what's happening in your own default mode network, stick around. There's a lot more where this came from.